Alright, so here's the plug and play itself, and I'm going to be doing a little something. I'm going to be showing you the games, but I will also be comparing them to their original 2600 counterparts. Starting off with Adventure. Alright, so the first game is Adventure, but before I talk about that, another cool thing is that before each game, you not only get the controls and game modes of each game, but you also get the original storyline. So here's Adventure, released in 1979 on the Atari 2600. And while this game may have many flaws, it definitely makes up for it with the first it's achieved, because this is the first adventure game to be released. The two flaws I see are the graphics. Now, I know this is a 1979 Atari 2600 game, and I know graphics don't make the game. Here's a comparison of the Atari 2600 counterpart. Next game up is Asteroids, originally released in 1979 on the arcade, and the Atari port being released in 1981. Now, Asteroids is classic. It's one of those Atari greats, especially this version. Graphics are good, sound is good, only issue I have is the controls, because you have to push up on the joystick to move. Here's the 2600 version. Notice the sound differences. The reasoning for this is that instead of using Atari's actual hardware, or the ROM chip in the cartridge, they used a program called NES on a chip, which means they took NES games, well, they actually made NES homebrews of Atari games. So therefore, it is not Atari's actual hardware. Next game on the collection is Breakout, originally released in the mid to late 70s on arcade, and then the late 70s, early 80s on the Atari. Now, Breakout is another one of those games that's just so classic it needs a no introduction. However, for those who don't know, it's pretty much just Pong on its side, and you have to hit bricks. And as usual, here's the 2600 counterpart. Next game up is Centipede, another game ported over from the arcades. Centipede is a very addicting game in my opinion. You control this big dot, and you shoot at other dots and what I believe are centipedes and other bugs. Again, very addicting. Next up is Circus Atari, another popular arcade game ported over to the 2600 and then eventually to this plug-and-play. Circus Atari is quite a bit like Breakout. Only differences are, instead of blocks we now have balloons, and instead of a single ball, we now have two clowns on a seesaw, for whatever reason. It does bring a new aspect to an already great concept, so I'll let it pass. It's a good game. Next up is Gravatar, a game very similar in gameplay to Space War, one of the first video games known to exist, released in 1964. While both of these games could be very good, they both have two flaws that just kind of cripple the game. The first thing is that you have to push up on the joystick to move. Now, I know this is Atari and it only has one button, but I still feel that if I wanted to go right, I should be able to push right on the joystick while moving right. The other thing is that it takes about 3 or 4 seconds for your ship to stop. Now, my guess is that they were trying to be realistic. Like, if you were actually piloting a spaceship, it probably wouldn't stop on a dime. But Come on. It's Atari. We don't need realism. Realism is best saved for modern game consoles. Xbox 360, PS3, that's where you need your realism. So, I don't really recommend the game, unless out of pure curiosity. But, out of all the games, the plug and play is still good nonetheless. Next up is Missile Command, another popular arcade game ported over to the VCS. You play as a missile, obviously, and you have to shoot these lines. I really don't know what they're supposed to be, but all I know is that they're lines. And you have to prevent them from destroying your cities. Just like what just happened right now. But it's a very fun and addicting game. I highly recommend it, and it's definitely worth picking up, especially if you can get this collection cheap. Next up is Pong. Now, I know what you're thinking. Logan, I didn't know Pong exists on the Atari. Aw, man, this game must be more rare than that Pepsi Invaders thing, where they hacked Space Invaders, and instead of aliens, we now have letters that spell Pepsi. Well, it exists. Both of them, actually. But Pong was not a standalone cart. It was actually a compilation cart called Video Olympics, which included other games such as hockey and basketball, along with many others. But let's focus on Pong now. I'm sure most of you should know what Pong is, but just in case you don't, it came out in 1972 and was the first video game made under the company Atari. But it was not the first game they made. As I said earlier, they also made the first video arcade game known to exist, Computer Space, 1 year prior. And the game consists of 2 lines and a dot, the original version being in black and white, and, as you can see, is played very similar to table tennis, or just tennis in general. It's a very fun and addicting game, despite its simplicity. And also, it's fun to play just because it's the first mainstream video arcade game. But I definitely recommend it. Try this one, especially if you can find the original Video Olympics cart on the Atari, because then you get to play with a paddle controller. Next up is volleyball, also known as Real Sports Volleyball on the Atari 2600, as it is part of the Real Sports series, which includes other games such as football and baseball. While I'm sure this is a good game, I've just never really gotten into sports games, so therefore I can't necessarily recommend it. But I have seen reviews online saying that it's a good game, so I'm sure that if you like volleyball, Atari games, or even the Real Sports series, then you should like this game. And finally, we come to the last game in this collection, Yar's Revenge. Before we get into the actual game, I just want to go over a few quick facts. The first is that this game was created and programmed by Howard Scott Warsaw. So, if you like this game, he's the one to thank. However, you can take this thanks back once you realize he created such infamous games such as Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and E.T. the Extraterrestrial. You know, the game that almost made the video game industry die. The other fact is that Yar is actually Ray spelled backwards, and Ray Kaiser, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, was the CEO of Atari when this game was being made. Now onto the game. You're Yar, and you have to avoid this force field. You have to go by this force field, which, to be honest, looks more like a broken VHS tape. And you have to shoot these blocks and get the quota. After that, you have to shoot at the Yar cannon. Simplistic? Yes, but still addicting. And I highly recommend this game. Well, I bet you'd like to hear some finishing thoughts right about now. And do I like this? Yes. Because even though it's an NES on a chip and the sound's horrible and inaccurate, like I mentioned in my side-by-side comparison, even though that, I still like it. Because especially now, these Ataris are starting to become collectible. And, you know, I'm starting to see these on eBay for, you know, nearly $100, $200, even $300 if you have a lot of controllers, accessories, games, you know what I mean. And the fact that you can get these for, you know, nearly, you know, $5, $10, something like that, you can just pick these up. That's pretty good. Because, I mean, the older of us can relive our childhood, and the younger of us can relive their childhood, if you know what I mean. And that's really all I have to say. As of now, I am currently selling this on my Logatronics page. If there is an annotation here, I have sold it. So, that's really all I have to say. Oh, and happy birthday, Atari. Oh, forget it.